There was once a man who barely spoke to her, not out of rudeness, nor out of arrogance, but because he was absorbed in his mission. He didn't flood her with compliments. He didn't chase, flatter, or bend. And yet, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She watched him from across the room, his silence speaking louder than the laughter of every other man vying for her attention. That story plays out every day, in bars, gyms, offices, and online. The truth is, the man who appears to ignore her is the one who often captures her mind the deepest. He's the one she replays in her thoughts, analyzes with her friends, and ultimately obeys, not because he asked, but because his presence demands it. This is the paradox of feminine psychology. Attention is her oxygen, but restraint is her obsession. And the man who learns how to regulate that balance becomes a master of her emotional world. At the core of this dynamic is a universal truth. Scarcity breeds value. The man who is constantly available, emotionally transparent, and always trying to win her over becomes predictable. And what is predictable loses its edge. On the contrary, the man who withholds, not manipulatively, but naturally, projects something far more powerful: control. He has control over his desires, over his energy, and most importantly, over his reactions. She can't figure him out, and that ambiguity creates mental gravity. Her mind circles him like a satellite orbits a planet. And in that orbit, submission often follows. This isn't about pretending not to care. It's about truly not being dependent on her presence for your sense of identity, power, or validation. That type of detachment is magnetic. Women can feel it instantly. They call it confidence. They call it mystery. But really, it's masculine self-containment. This pattern is reinforced by how attention functions as a form of psychological currency. Most modern women are flooded with digital validation, likes, comments, heart emojis, DMS. They've grown numb to it. When a man gives too much attention, he blends into the background noise. But the man who resists the urge to validate becomes an anomaly. He becomes valuable by standing out, not by doing more, but by doing less. This is why she listens more to the man who rarely speaks. This is why she dresses differently if she thinks he will be somewhere. And this is why she obeys a man who might not even acknowledge her directly, because the desire for his attention outweighs the comfort of her control. From a psychological standpoint, this is a form of intermittent reinforcement, a powerful behavioral principle. When rewards are given randomly rather than consistently, the subject becomes addicted to the pursuit of them. A man who is emotionally neutral, not cold, just not reactive, becomes a walking slot machine for validation. She never knows when she'll get the reward, if ever. That uncertainty breeds obsession. She starts altering her behavior to earn his recognition. In contrast, the man who gives consistent, guaranteed approval kills that tension and becomes emotionally expendable. The reality is this: women submit to what they cannot fully possess. And when you are a man of purpose, a man whose life does not revolve around her, you remain just out of reach. This brings us to the concept of masculine detachment. The man who seems to ignore her isn't playing a game. He's living a mission. He's not unavailable out of strategy. He's unavailable because he's occupied. His emotional energy is not for sale. It is invested in something greater than validation: his vision, his craft, his legacy. And that's what stirs something primal in her. Women may be drawn to affection, but they respect obsession, especially when that obsession is not them. She may be the center of attention for many men, but the one who treats her like she's not the center of his world is the one she tries hardest to impress. This flips the power dynamic. Now she's the one performing, seeking approval, stepping into the feminine role of pleasing rather than leading. And in that shift, obedience naturally follows. To understand this even deeper, we must acknowledge the truth of hypergamy, a woman's instinct to seek the highest value man available. But high value is not defined by wealth or looks alone. It's defined by psychological dominance. A man who is unaffected by her presence is signaling that he does not need her, and in doing so, he positions himself as above her social value. This triggers a deep biological urge in her, the urge to secure, submit to, and be chosen by the man who could have anyone, but doesn't chase anyone. Her need to please is amplified when she senses that he could walk away at any time and wouldn't flinch if he did. This perceived replaceability makes him irreplaceable in her eyes. Death of desire, the Stoic's path to cold clarity. This is not a guide. This is not self-help. This is war. Kill the need. Master the mind. That is why she obeys. Not because he yelled, not because he threatened, but because his silence is more commanding than their screams. She obeys the man who does not move for her, who does not over-explain, who does not seek permission. The man who, with calm eyes and a grounded demeanor, shows that her presence is not a necessity, but a luxury. She obeys not because he dominates her, but because his self-mastery leaves no room for chaos, and her obedience is the only way she can stay close to that center of power. Power, true power, is not loud. It doesn't bark orders or demand attention. It doesn't raise its voice. Power is silent. It radiates from a man who doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, and doesn't react. He doesn't try to win the room. He lets the room adjust to his frequency. This is the man she obeys, not because he pressures her, but because he doesn't need her. She senses something primal in his indifference, something ancient. A man who governs himself commands the respect of others. And a woman, even one steeped in modern ideals, still feels this ancestral pull to follow the man whose silence feels more stable than another man's obsession. That's the paradox she can't explain. The more he withholds, the more she submits, not in resentment, but in awe. This is what we call erotic distance, the gap between the masculine presence and the feminine need to feel it. That space becomes a tension field. And in that tension, her femininity deepens. She becomes more expressive, more nurturing, more obedient. Why? Because the man who ignores her, without cruelty but with clarity, is not pushing her away. He's pulling her inward by not entering her emotional arena. He's not there to be her equal in chaos. He stands still while she swirls, and the more he stands still, the more she gravitates toward his stillness. This is polarity. Feminine energy is movement, emotion, waves. Masculine energy is structure, silence, the mountain. When a man becomes the mountain, the storm of her mind begins to calm. That's when obedience isn't a task, it's a surrender. This obedience doesn't come from force. It's birthed from emotional imbalance, a concept most men misunderstand. When she feels fully understood, validated, and pursued, she becomes comfortable. Comfort breeds complacency. Complacency leads to dominance. And dominance kills the feminine need to follow. But when a man leaves gaps in his attention, gaps in his reactions, gaps in his approval, he activates her imagination. She fills those gaps with her own desire, her own efforts, her own behavioral shifts. She tries harder. She dresses differently. She speaks softer. She obeys, not to please him, but to try and earn what he never promised in the first place. That's the key. He's not withholding to manipulate. He simply lives by standards. And those standards create a frame that commands respect. This leads us to the masculine frame, the invisible architecture that separates the feared from the forgotten. The masculine frame is not posture or alpha bravado. It's the silent boundaries a man sets with his time, energy, and emotions. He doesn't give attention freely. He doesn't reward disrespect. He doesn't explain his values. He lives them. And the more consistent he is in this frame, the more she begins to orbit it. Not because she's weak, but because women crave structure. She may rebel, she may test, but it's not because she wants to break him. It's because she wants to feel that he cannot be broken. And once that certainty is established, she softens. She listens. She aligns. She obeys because she trusts the leadership of a man who won't sacrifice his soul just to win her smile. In her heart, she doesn't want to lead. She doesn't want a man whose attention is cheap. She doesn't want a man whose world crumbles when she's upset. She wants to feel safe in his direction. She wants to feel chosen, but not chased. She wants to feel desired, but not worshipped. The man who understands this commands her obedience without ever raising his voice. His power lies in the fact that he doesn't need to prove anything. He knows who he is. And because of that, she learns who she must become to stay close to that energy. So if you ever wonder why she ignores the man who tries so hard, yet obeys the man who barely notices her, it's not cruelty, it's wiring, it's polarity, and it's ancient. The man who ignores her presence doesn't do it to hurt her. He does it because he's too focused on building his empire, sharpening his mind, and living his mission. And because of that, she follows. Not out of obligation, but out of desire. Because deep down, she doesn't want to be your world. She wants to enter your world. She wants to feel like she earned her place inside it. And that begins the moment she realizes your attention is not given, it must be deserved. Thus remember, we are Indecepta. Becoming Indecepta is the code they never wanted you to learn. A psychological war map for men, forbidden teachings fused with modern strategy for influence, dominance, and self-mastery. If you want peace, prepare for war. Welcome to the Indecepta archive, where the undeceived rise. No ads, no distractions, just pure, uninterrupted power. As a crusader of the archive, you gain infinite access to every video, every truth, every strategy, without censorship, delay, or interruption. New drops daily, delivered to you before the world sees them. Raw, unfiltered, elite. Indeceptions.com